It was the first week of August of 1997. I was on Haight Street in San Francisco, and I'd caught various rides out there with Further Festival that summer. And, I can't say it was a solid time, good time, bad time. It was a day-to-day, minute-to-minute time. Because I'd come out there following the mystery of how I'm going to get there on the tour, and then having many magical experiences with through the music and catching rides and meeting various people and all these things. But the tour was over, and there was a rumor that there was going to be a extra show on the Further tour that summer. And some rumors said it was going to be on Jerry's birthday, and some said it was going to be on August 9th in memorial of the day that he died. So anyhow, the rumor was that show was going to be in Golden Gate Park, and that was the whole reason why I was sticking around that Golden Gate Park area and sleeping in the park of a night and living day to day. I had to say, it was just one of those wide open times in my life. In my youth, I was 23 years old, 24 years old. It was 1997 in August. So yes, I was 24 years old, going to turn 25 in that December. But anyhow, that's where I was. And on one of these days, in the middle of that week, it just so happened that on the street that day, as chance sometimes does, there was a meeting of people. I met some dude from somewhere, another white dude, some other dude, Jamaican American who came here from Jamaica. And the three of us just sort of somehow all met at one time, and we got to talking, and we're having a good time because we were all sort of in the same situation, We could relate to one another, and sharing the sufferings and strifes and challenges and expectations and disappointments and all these things that a person shares. All of a sudden, this baggage you carry, when you join together as a people and carry it, all of a sudden the load's lightened, and in that lightening of the load comes a elevated spirit, and in that elevated spirit comes a joyous celebration. And that's what we were having right there on Haight Street. And in that joyous celebration of having met each other and getting to know each other and just discussing our lives and our challenges and where we came from, like, hey, would you, the subject of, do we have enough money to pull together to get a 40 amongst us? And between the three of us, we did. We all chipped in some change and the $1 or whatever, $2 and whatever it came to get a 40-ounce beer. We had that, and there's the liquor stores up and down that street. One on every block, perhaps. One every 2 blocks at the most. We didn't have to go far. We got that 40. And so the three of us were sharing a 40, sharing our troubles and triumphs and all these things together, and we were having a high old time, and with that beer in that paper bag. Well, as we did so, we look what would have been, if you're coming out the storefront, to the left. Golden Gate Park would be to the right. This was to the left. Okay, so up to the left comes 2 women who come up a hill, and they were cops, and it was clear from the get-go that their feet hurt because one of them, as soon as she come to the top of that corner, she pulls her foot down, or pulls her shoe down off of her foot, and she rubs her foot, and she looks in pain. And part of this, this is kind of what caught our attention as much as anything. I mean, yes, we see cops coming, but the fact that they're not, you don't normally see cops coming in pain. And we were kind of caught in the attention of the pain that there was going on. It was like, her feet hurts. Well, she turns towards us and sees the three of us, like, watching us, looking at the two of them, and one of them has her feet in pain. And he didn't like that we was looking, even though we weren't looking like laughing at him or nothing like that. But anyhow, they quickly approached us and said, "Hey, that beer, you can't have that beer out. Dump it out." Well, the three of us, we couldn't really be charged. Maybe we could have been, but we weren't charged with an open container, because which of the three of us would you charge? We only had one open container. But anyhow, it was dump it out. But the next thing came, show us your identification. I didn't have identification. And so I said, I didn't have identification. Well, if you don't have identification, it's against the law to not have identification. And how do we know you're not a serial killer? One of the ladies said, and I said, well, I don't know. How would I know you're not a serial killer? And she's like, well, you have to identify yourself. I said, you haven't even identified yourself. And she said, I'm officer such and such number. I said, well, I'm homeless person 756. And she's like, all right, you're going to go to jail. And they get on their radio and they get somebody, cars coming. Okay, and in the meantime, as they did the three of us, well, the one dude, he was free to go. The Jamaican guy, it so happened that he had an outstanding warrant for marijuana. So he was under arrest too. So me and the Jamaican guy were waiting for a cop car to come. And cop car comes, and it's men, of course. And they pull up, and the lady cops tell them, this one, referring to me, gave us a hard time. So down to the police station I go. Remind you, I'm being arrested for failure to produce identification. And so I go to not where there was a jail cell, but I don't even know what you would call it, a cop office. There was just a holding front where you're waited there on Haight Street, where you're waited to be transported down to San Francisco jail. And as we wait there in that holding front, they had some cells back up through there, but they were just cells. And we were out in in front of the guys in the booths, the cops in the booths. And there, me and the Jamaican guy was there together, and he was like, he was like, not to put blame on him, but he was kind of pumping me up with enthusiasm to be rebelling against things. He's like, yeah, you good, you did have a right. She didn't give her identification. She gave a number. Why should you give more than a number? And how can you validate her number? So why should you think she, He might not have been even saying all that. He just kind of seemed to be supporting me. And I was like having his support. And there he was beside of me. We're both handcuffed to a seat there. A bar between us and the seat. We're both handcuffed to that bar that sat between us. Well, they unhandcuffed me and they stood me up there in the center, and they said to me, so, we heard you were giving her some trouble. And I'm like, I just asked her, blah, 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 Put your hands on top of your head. We're going to give you a pat down. One cop stood in front of me, and another cop stood behind me. Now, there was a black cop watching in the booth. There was a white cop, and there was a Hispanic cop. So, and it's kind of irony, because amongst the inmates inside there that were not put in a cell, it was me, the Jamaican, who was black, and a Mexican guy who barely spoke English at all. So we had, amongst the inmates, we had a Hispanic, we had a black, and we had a white. And amongst the cops, we had a Hispanic, a black, and a white. Okay, the black cop was in the booth not taking part in the pat down. And the guy who was in front of me was, if I remember correctly, the white guy. And the guy who was patting me down from behind was the Hispanic guy. And he comes up from my ankles, boom, 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 slapping hard, coming up to my knees, boom, 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 coming up towards my crotch, boom, boom, boom. And the harder he comes, then I knew the next pat was going to come towards my crotch, and I jerked. And as I jerked, boom, he spreads my legs back apart, and he says, "Do not move." And said, "No more warnings, do not move." So back up the ankles, it comes, boom, 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 boom. And I jerked again. And as I did, the cop in front of me puts his elbow in his arm, his forearm, underneath my chin. The cop behind me ducks down, and over his shoulders I go, one to my back, one to my head, boom! My head slams off the jail cell floor. Hit my head hard, and I hear, "Your movements were sudden and unpredictable." And in that flash of light, and in that crack of my neck, all of a sudden, all that disdain for rebellion and saying I don't have to give my number, blah, 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 I realized, oh, shit. All those rights are out the door. And I was put back on that bench beside the Jamaican guy, and all of a sudden he looks at me and he says, "I saw that coming." This is the same guy that, like, 15 minutes earlier was like, "Speak up for your rights, man. I want to be beside this man. He's standing up for his rights," and all this. But no, all of a sudden, no. Well, he was being quiet too. He didn't want to be next. But he did say, he even said he said this, "I saw that coming, man." I'm like, why didn't you tell me? I didn't say that, but I was just like, oh, because I was in too much pain, flash of light and everything. Well, he ends up getting released from that cell there. I'm not exactly sure how his thing got resolved, but me and the Hispanic guy, who barely spoke English, we get transported on down to the San Francisco jail because they still hadn't come up with ID for me or whatever. So we go to a actual holding cell down in San Francisco where there's a bunch of people all in one cell. I don't know what everybody's in there for. It's one of them, hardcore cells, is what you'd say, and it was the dregs and all that. And he's talking to me. He's saying to me in the broken English he speaks. He's like, "What do you think will happen to me? What do you think? What do you think?" And he tells to me in the English he can speak that he had brought into America, he had gotten caught without a license, driving a vehicle with 2 pounds of heroin. Now I'm thinking a illegal immigrant, because he has no license to be in America. Illegal immigrant. 2 pounds of heroin, unlicensed, driving a vehicle. I'm like, it's not looking good for you, man. No, it's bad. It's bad for you. But it so happened that about an hour or so later, 2 people get released since me and him get released together, and he kind of wanted to stick with me as we come out of the jail. He didn't know where to go. He followed me for some distance, and I'm like, dude, I don't know where you need to go. I'm going back to Haight Street. I don't think that's where you want to go, So, but anyhow, that's the end of that story.